2.1 is exponential functions and their graphs. Stop.
He just starts talking.
I already know. Okay. So, of course, we're going to graph exponential functions. Okay. Exponential function with a base of a can be written as f of x equals a to the x power. Okay. Where a is greater than 0 and a cannot equal 1. X is any real number. So when I do a graph that has a function with a power of x, that means I can have fractional exponents or I can have whole number exponents. I cannot have negative exponents. If I have negative exponents, what do you have to do with the exponent? If I have
fraction.
Well, yeah, if I have 4 to the negative 3, then I have to change it into 1 over 4 cubed, and I can graph from there. You cannot have negative exponents, okay? Cannot have negative exponents, so we have to use rules of exponents to solve. If you have 4 cubed, what does that equal? What is 4 times 4 times 4?
4 times 4, 8.
Probably like 36.
64. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. What happens if I have, let's see here, 8 to the 1/3? What does that mean I'm actually doing?
Is that when you put it in the square root thing?
Yes, except for not a square root, what root? A cube root. So I changed this to the cube root of 8, which gives me what?
2.
2. Because 8 breaks down into 4 and 2, and 2 and 2. There's a group of 3. So the cube root of 8 is 2, or 8 to the 1/3 is 2. Okay? So you're going to have to do things like that. Okay, what happens if it says, this is really easy. If it wants you to evaluate something with a calculator, you should be able to get all these problems right. Okay? So if it says, evaluate, and it says 2 to the x equals negative 3.1. What do you do with that? How do you plug that into your calculator?
2 caret negative 3.1.
Yeah, and what do you get?
I thought it was your question.
Yeah.
What do you get when you get to there?
0.11662.
Okay, so let's just round to 2 decimal places. 0.12. Okay? You're going to have a lot on your homework where they tell you to solve it using a graphing calculator. So if I have 1.05 to the 2x when x equals 12, what does that mean I'm actually doing?
I got air.
Well, you probably didn't put parentheses in.
Wait,
So are you doing
put
1.05
parentheses in?
caret 2 times 12?
Yes.
Wow, isn't that
Oh, and then you put that in there.
Yeah, so I have 1.05, 2 times 12, or 2 times 12 is,
So I put a parenthesis.
you either have to put parentheses,
Where'd the 1.5
or
come
do
from?
you know what 2 times 12 is?
6, 12, no.
So I can literally just put
Hey,
1.05 to the 24th in there. Make it easier. Okay.
Wait, where'd the 1.5 come from?
From the original equation, 1.05 to the 2x.
So wait, is the first one done with the 0.21?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. 1.05 to the 24th gives you 3.23.
You're doing three. Oh, you're doing great.
Okay, gives you 3.23. So you're going to have to do a bunch of equations in that form, and solving using your calculator like that. You can also do it, let's say they give you 2 to the x to the negative x, and x equals pi. What do you have to do with that?
Oh, years.
2
Two
minus
times negative
x equals 3.14.
No, do not put 3.14 in there. You have a pi button for a reason.
Negative 6.28.
Okay, put the pi button in there and then do your math. So yeah, 2 to the negative pi is what?
Why can pi be
So
negative?
not negative 6.2.
Nope.
Why can pi be negative?
It's point what?
1, 2.
0.12 as well. You need to use the pi button. The pi button is above the caret button. You press 2, then you press caret, then you press the negative sign, then you press second, and you press the pi button, the caret button again, because there's what pi is. You press enter, and you'll get 0.12 when you round.
Is pi
Or
the same
0.11,
negative?
I'm sorry, you round to 0.11. What'd you say?
Is pi the same negative? Asking the deeper question.
Is it still 3.14? Is that what you're asking me?
I guess, yeah.
Yes, but when you do 2 to the negative 3.14, you also get 0.11.
It's like a negative 6.
You get negative.
I don't understand.
You're multiplying 2 times negative pi. You don't have the caret in there. It's not
It won't let me or something.
2 to the
Okay, and then do we
Negative.
still keep the parentheses?
Okay. So that is some stuff you're going to have to do. Now, that should be the easy part. So, hopefully we can figure that out. Let's talk about graphing. When it says graph, and compare to the parent function, or just graph a function. Let's say it gives you, it says sketch. And it gives you f of x equals 2 to the x power. When it says sketch, what do you think I need to do? Yeah, you're going to graph, but you're going to have to make a chart of inputs and outputs. Okay, when it says sketch, I need to see your work. Okay, so I'm going to have an input for x, right? And then I have my outputs, or my, is whatever, it's 2 to the x power, so my output's my y. I'm going to input negatives and positives. So negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2.
Where are you getting the points from? Or you just like...
You just choose random ones. I'm choosing low numbers because they're easy. So if I have 2 to the x and I want to put negative 3 in there, that means I have 2 to the negative 3. What do you have to do to that? Yes, flip it. Good, Josh. So I have 1 over 2 cubed. What's 2 cubed? 8. So you get 1/8 when you put in negative 3. Now, 2 to the negative 2. What do I have to do? Flip. So you get 2 squared. What's 2 squared? So I have 1/4. 2 to the negative 1, I have to flip. So I get, what's 2 to the first? 1/2. What's anything to the 0 power? 1. And then I have 2 to the first, which is, and I have 2 squared, which is, and I will graph that, okay? Because when it says sketch, then I need to make a graph of it. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2. And since these are fractions, I'm actually going to start with an eighth probably and go 1/4, half, and then what would it be? Whole 1, and then, so you can do it however you want. 1 1/8, 1 1/4, you know, all the way up to 4. Or you can count by ones. I don't really care what you do, or halves. I don't care. You just need to label it for me. I'm gonna actually go by half. 1. And so when you graph that, -3 goes to an eighth, -2 goes to a fourth, this goes to a half, 0 is at 1, then I have 2, and then I have 4. So my graph should look like an exponential equation. Okay? So you're going to have to do simple graphs like that, okay? What happens if I would have said that you want to sketch a function? I'm going to use this same graph over here. What happens if I say sketch f of x when it is x to the negative x? What's going to happen to that graph?
It will go down.
It's not going to go down.
Well,
It will fall down, but not the way you're thinking. Yeah, it's going to fall down by going this way. Okay? So it doesn't fall down like flip across this axis. It falls like this. Yes.
Does it ever flip across?
No.
So, okay.
Not in, well, no. Not in,
Find a way to do that.
not when it has,
You're looking at it like Josh.
not when it has a negative exponent. Not when it has a negative exponent. Okay? When it has a negative exponent, it flips over the y-axis, not over the x-axis. Okay? So if I have x again, and here I have, I'm sorry, let's make this 2. We'll use the same numbers since we already have that. And let's say I have this, okay? We're just going to use the same numbers because it will be easy.
We just use the same numbers every time.
Yeah, but you're not always going to have the same base. That's the whole point. So if I do this, I know, okay, I know that if I have a negative, now look, this is a little tricky because you have 2 to the negative -3. What happens when you do that? It makes it positive. So what's 2 cubed? 8. So that's why it becomes different because instead of being 1/8 now it is positive 8, okay? And so then if I have 2 to the -2, that means I get 2 squared, which is 4. And if I have 2 to the -1, that means I have 2 to the first, which gives me 2.
Just flip the 0.
And then anything to the 0 gives me 1. And then I have 2 to the -1, which means I have 1 over 2 to the first, which gives me 1/2. And then I have 2 to the -2, which gives me 1 over 2 squared, which gives me 1/4. Now, when I go to graph that, okay, when I'm at -3, I'm at positive 8. So I'm going to put that up here just to represent it. -2 is at 4. -1 is at 2. 1 is at 1/2. And 2 is at 1/4. So my graph goes opposite direction of falling this way. Okay? I know, it's as good as it's going to get. Deal with it. Okay? So when I graph that, that's what that turns into. Properties of exponents. Okay? Let's talk about properties of exponents.
Why do we like this with a freaking graph?
When you have something like the same base, let's say I have a to the x times a to the y. What happens with those exponents? What do you do with those exponents?
Multiply.
You add them.
You add them. If they have the same base and they're being multiplied together, the bases, you add the exponents. Okay? What happens if I have division? A to the x over a to the y.
I guess you subtract.
You subtract. Good. So I say x minus y. What happens if I have a power raised to a power? You multiply them. That's when I multiply them. Okay? I then multiply them. So I would get a to the xy. What happens if I have anything raised to the 0? So a to the 0 is 1. Even if it's a letter, it's 1. Okay? Even if it's a letter, it's 1. What happens if I have something like this? A, B to the x power. What do I do with that power? You what?
It goes to both.
Yeah, I'm going to distribute it into both. So I'm going to have a to the x, and I'm going to have b to the x. These are all rules that you have done since pre-algebra, because I taught them in pre-algebra the other day to my 8th graders.
That was back in 8th grade.
You also did them in 9th grade, and you also did them in geometry, and you also did them last year in algebra
I
too.
don't think I learned a single thing in geometry.
What happens if I have this?
Dude, I don't.
What do you think I do there?
Goes to both.
It goes to both again. So I have a to the x over b to the x. Okay? And all these rules can be reversed as well so that you can undo things or simplify things. And what happens if I have, the last one is always the one I forget for some reason, the absolute value of a squared.
How you doing better than me?
Okay?
Basically just a square.
This is weird. You're going to take it and you're going to do the absolute value of a, and then you're going to square it so that you get this. Because remember, when you do absolute value, you have to have a positive answer. So we take away the square first so that we can get our positive answer, and then we can square from there. Okay? Those are the rules of exponents that you need to be able to follow. What? No, one more thing.
There's space on the board part.
No, it's just I'm dividing it. There's 8 examples, so I'm doing 4 today and 4 tomorrow. Okay, so then we get graphing. We get back into graphing some stuff, and we need to talk about what makes things shift, and what, yeah, for our graphs. Okay. If I have f of x equals 3x plus 1. What does that plus 1 do to my graph?
That makes sense. Because it's up there.
You go over.
Is it with the x or is it like by itself? It's with my x, so it's not going to shift up and down, it's going to shift left and right. And which way does this one shift? If it's a positive one, it's going to shift, it's going to shift what? Left. Remember that anything, just like with any other graphs that we've done, like quadratic graphs that we've done already this year, when it's with the x, it's opposite of what the sign is. It's opposite of what the sign is. So because this is positive, when I would graph it, it would be negative, which means it would shift to the left, not to the positive side. Okay? So that one shows that it shifts 1 unit to the left.
Who's gonna need any of this stuff on the board after you graduate high school?
I do.
Oh,
after
you're
you're
not
not
supposed to answer that.
I'm standing up, alright? Trying to get my
Okay? Now,
I'm trying.
what happens if I have it written this way? F of x equals 3 to the x power minus 2. That 2 is not with the x, so what axis is it going with?
grade. Y.
The y, okay? And the y stays true to what it's doing, so it's going to shift what way?
This one's down.
This one's down. This one's down. The y stays true to what the sign is, okay? So it's going to shift 2 units down. Okay, what happens if I have f of x equals negative 3 to the x power? What does that negative do that's out in front of there? It flips it over what axes? Yes, flips it over the x-axis. Because remember, we talked about right here, this, if it's with the exponent, flips it over the y. If it's outside of here, and like multiplied in, it's going to flip it over the x-axis. And then that should be the next one, I believe. Yes, let's say it says f of x equals 3 to the negative x. That flips it over the y-axes. Okay? Those are the things you're going to need to be able to identify tonight on your homework so that you can graph them the proper way. And we will stop there, and tomorrow we'll continue with 4.1.